do you like Agatha Christie, and you were to say no, she'd turn around and walk away. I think it's one of the nice things about Manjiri. She's quite open about things. Agatha Christie is one thing she's not open about. I think that parenthetically, it's a nice way to be able to judge people. You'd eliminate a lot of people very quickly if you had something like that. You could walk up and say, hello, do you like Agatha Christie? And you say, no, okay. I'm not going to waste any more time with you. Goodbye. And you move on to the next person. But to a large extent, the trailer 4 does replicate Agatha Christie. I was just looking to read the first sentence. If I can get my hands on it, I'll let you do it. But Agatha Christie, for those of you who have not read her, the first sentence is very crucial, because the first sentence in all Agatha Christie books resumes the story in one way or another. When you get to the end, if you were to go back and read the first sentence again, it would make a lot of sense. And maybe you could read it. I can't see it.
Okay. Prologue. 19. It's not the prologue. I'm sorry. Okay. Just the question. A plunge into the future. The wild question sprung to mind as his gaze skimmed the countryside.
Okay. That sentence will make a lot of sense at the end of this book. And that's very much an Agatha Christie style. Every word matters. And I know how Manjiri writes, and every word in this book does matter. She's thought about it, she's pondered it, she slaved over it before she wrote it down, and then she went back, because she does a great deal of rewrite and has rewritten this book I don't know how many times before it finally went to the publisher. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because I have another session coming up tomorrow about the blank page, how writers possibly could deal with the blank page, and we'll all be taking that up again as a question tomorrow, which I think is an interesting one. I know Manjiri has solved that by pretty much writing in her head. She has things pretty well clear in her head before she types a letter. Okay, I'll pass it on to someone else for the moment. The important thing, the reason I'm going to transfer this to the gentleman to my left is because the trailer 4 takes place in Salzburg, Salzburg seminar. Salzburg is where I met Manjiri. It's where she's returned a couple of times. It's where she set the book. And Salzburg is a wonderful location to set anything, a book, a film, anything creative, because there's so much there. And I'll pass a native of Salzburg here to tell you a little bit more about it.
Thank you, Neil. As I was born in Salzburg, I obviously know the city inside out, and when you grow up, you always have your grudges with your hometown. You think if it's a small city, it's too boring, it's too small, you know the people, and you have to travel and get more experience in order to really appreciate your hometown, which I'm doing now. I've been abroad several times and work for an international organization, the Salzburg Global Seminar, and it makes me now appreciate much more what I have in this small, boring city called Salzburg, which is actually not so boring. Manjiri, coming to the book, approached me 2 years ago, roughly, in 2014. Sent me an email mentioning that she's a fellow of the seminar and she would love to come to Salzburg to do some research on a new book. I didn't know her before, so I obviously Googled her, was very impressed by the record of books that she produced and the many articles that mentioned her and praised her work. And we had a short discussion internally how we could invite her to come for, I think 10 days was it initially? 15 days, which is usually what we don't do. so easily because we running our own sessions and otherwise it's the hotels, so we needed to clear the space to have her. But it was a relatively quick and easy decision because we were very excited about the prospect to have an acclaimed Indian writer coming to Salzburg and doing a book about the seminar. And so when I picked Manjiri up from the airport, she was very direct in what she wanted because she wanted to have a lot of information about the forthcoming book. And the first 48 hours were basically my personal trailer for because she asked me questions that I never thought of, like how long do you need to drive a car from the local police station to the city center? And what's the average amount of rain that's coming down on a certain particular month? Or how many people do fit into this venue? And which venue would you attack potentially if you were thinking as a criminal? And all those kind of questions, which really made me think this is the most amazing time that I could have because I'm not a writer, but I really felt that I was basically co-conspiring the book with her, at least in the beginning, and it was great fun to come up with ideas and suggestions of it. And then Manjiri left, and we didn't hear from each other for a while, and then she asked me for fact-checking, and it was the first time I had the opportunity to read a manuscript of an unpublished book, which was extremely exciting. And I was even more excited to hear that she got published by Bloomsbury, which was absolutely stunning for us. And it was a great honor to now have our own hotel novel, basically, and that the seminar is presented so much. So yeah, so far, so good.
All right, now pass the mic over to someone else who's got another view.
I'm going to pass the mic on to Roman Gerodimus because I've talked enough about the trailer 4, so I'm not going to, but he's going to talk now.
So I only finished reading the trailer 4 a couple of days ago, and I don't know how many of you were in this previous session, but I have a very close relationship with Salzburg and with the Salzburg Global Seminar and the Schloss Leopoldskron because I've been going there every year for the last 8 years. In fact, I'm trying to add, every year I go there, I add the weeks that I've spent there, and eventually at the end of my life I'll be able to say I spent this number of weeks in the palace, because not many, I could never imagine doing that. But anyway, I've learned this space quite well, so that's what that was the initial spark to read the book. But then the book is obviously stands alone in its own merit. You don't need to know the space or to have been to Salzburg to read the book. It's an amazingly exciting book. It had so much fun reading it. Knowing the spaces just added an extra level of tension because I could see where this was going. I could almost solve the clues just as the heroes were working them out. So I was like shouting in the middle of my bedroom reading the book. I was like, no, you have to do this. No, don't go there, go there. And it was just very exciting. But it's that kind of book that it's a page turner, but it's also, I think Manjiri, what has done, which is actually really seriously important, is that she's captured a lot of the stories. There's so much lore and legend and myth around that space. There's so much history to it, from the Archbishop Firmian, who had it built in the 18th century, to the seminar today. And there's so much legend and myth and fact and history. And having been there all this time, and Thomas was there, of course, and we've all heard these stories, and it was the first time that I actually saw these stories on paper. So I think she's actually beyond the page-turning thriller, which I totally guarantee, by the way. I guarantee you're gonna have fun, and I recommend it. There was an extra layer of, actually, you know what, she's captured all this oral history, essentially, that nobody has captured on paper before. And it is a great, it has a great texture for space. I was actually quite, you're very observant.
Yes.
And that makes me really nervous. Like when I meet people who are really observant, it's
I'm reading you right now.
I know, it's like, so, and speaking of reading, I was reading this book, and it's really interesting. It was actually an analysis on Tintin. It was, but I think it's the same thing in your book. It's about being a good reader, not a reader of books, but a reader of clues. and it's about heroes being able to decipher clues and to read peoples and spaces and buildings, and it is essentially that skill of reading situations and having your eyes open. So I think that's actually one of the key skills that comes out of this book, I think. So I, yeah, definitely recommend it. It was great fun to read.
Okay, so you have here essentially 3.5 views of Manjiri. So yet you wouldn't say anything.
I don't want to. I'll say
No,
something. I'll say something.
no, we'll leave it at
I'm
3.5.
going to say something. I'm going to say something. He doesn't give the mic, so I just have to ask for it. No, I just have to say one thing, that I may have written the book, but like you said, there's so many things that came to me, and it's thanks to Thomas, because he literally co-worked with me on this book, and because I didn't know anything about Salzburg, and it had to be written like an insider. And I didn't want to seem like an Indian writer trying to attempt to write a foreign book. And I think his help and his inputs really went a long way in creating that reality. So I really have to thank Thomas for it. And I want to announce an award. It's not an award, it's, maybe you can take this. It's a competition around the Trail of Four. And so the competition has started, but the winner gets a free ticket to Salzburg, okay? And that is sponsored by the Pune International Literary Festival, and a 2-night stay at the Meyerhof in the Schloss Leopoldskron, which is sponsored by the Salzburg Global Seminar. So if you're interested, go buy the book and go to the Bloomsbury page to take part in this competition. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions that we can answer before we go on just babbling away up here? Let's see.
It's just a half an hour session. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.